and legislative law, the fiscal committees of the state legislature are authorized to hold hearings on the executive budget proposal. Today's hearing will be limited to a discussion of the governor's proposed budget for the Department of Environmental Conservation, the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, Department of Agriculture and Markets, and the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. Following each presentation, there will be some time allowed for questions from the chairs of the fiscal committees and other legislators. So first I'd like to welcome Basil Sagos, who is Acting Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Conservation. Welcome, glad to have you here today. But before you begin, I'd like to introduce our colleagues who have joined us. First, we have Senator Liz Krueger, also joined by Senator Tom O'Mara, Senator Betty Little, Senator Diane Savino, and Senator Brad Hoylman. So welcome. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Assemblyman and Chair Denny Farrell.
Thank you very much. We've been joined by Assemblyman Michael Cusick, Assemblywoman Carrie Werner, Assemblyman Steve Otis, and Assemblywoman Russell, Assemblywoman Lifton, Assemblyman Steve Engelbright, Assemblywoman Fahey, and Assemblyman Oaks, who will give us his people.
Yes, we've been joined by Assemblyman Steck, Assemblyman Crouch, and Assemblyman Lopez.
Thank you, Assemblyman. The Acting Commissioner's testimony will be followed by a question and answer period by members of the legislature, as I said. And after the final question and answer period, an opportunity will be provided for members of the public to briefly express their views on the budgets under discussion. At this time, I would like to begin the testimony of Acting Commissioner Basil Sagos. And again, welcome. So happy to have you here this morning.
It's great to be here. Thank you. Chairwoman Young, Chairman Farrell, Senator O'Mara, and Assemblyman Engelbright, and members of the Legislative, Fiscal, and Environmental Conservation Committees, I am Basil Sagos, Acting Commissioner for DEC. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss Governor Cuomo's budget recommendations for DEC for state fiscal year 2016-17. Joining me today are Julie Tai, Assistant Commissioner for Intergovernmental and Legislative Affairs, and Jeff Stefanko, Assistant Commissioner for Administration. Since taking office, Governor Cuomo has established one of the strongest environmental records in the nation. This record is built upon the belief that the state's prosperity, both now and in the future, depends upon the health and resilience of its land, water, and air. We're protecting our environment to ensure our economy remains competitive long into the future. Nowhere is the governor's record on environment stronger than on climate change. Indeed, climate change mitigation and adaptation are the centerpieces of the governor's environmental agenda, and New York State is now a global leader in that effort. The state has made great strides in reducing greenhouse gas emissions from the power sector through the multi-state regional greenhouse gas initiative. We're not stopping there. The 2015 State Energy Plan has set ambitious targets to further this effort by reducing carbon emissions by 40% below 1990 levels by the year 2030, and mandate that 50% of the energy used in New York comes from renewable sources by 2030. So New York will be a leader in the clean energy economy. Working together with the legislature over the last 5 years, we began to restore the Environmental Protection Fund. We put sorely needed resources into parks and open spaces. We prioritized hunting, fishing, and outdoor tourism, and enacted one of the nation's strictest bans on illegal ivory sales. And importantly, directed hundreds of millions of dollars into wastewater infrastructure upgrades. Just last year alone, we reformed and extended the Brownfields Cleanup Program. We provided $1 billion to the state Superfund and increased funding to address oil spills. The vital signs of New York's environment are trending upward thanks to our collective work. Air pollution levels have been slashed dramatically since 2005, and New York is in attainment for all federal air quality standards except ozone, which is largely an upwind states issue. In 2014, 70% of all waters fully support uses for which they are designated, and that's up from 66% in 2005. Our lands, too, are gaining protection. Since 2011, DEC has acquired nearly 100,000 acres of fee and easements, protecting lands in every region of the state. And we're nearly done acquiring the Finch Prime property in the Adirondacks, which is one of the largest land conservation and public access projects in the state's history. Outdoor recreation is booming across the state: hunting, fishing, biking, and camping. For example, thanks to the state's focused effort in the Adirondacks, tourism-related employment is up nearly 8%, tourism spending is up 10%, and visitation is up 15% just in the Adirondacks. And we're going to bring that same level of attention to the Catskills this year. All of this is good news, but make no mistake, the task ahead of us and the challenge ahead of us remains enormous, whether it's climate change or invasive species or the burdens faced by disadvantaged communities. That's why this year the governor has laid out one of the most ambitious environmental agendas of any governor in generations. First, the governor has proposed a $300 million Environmental Protection Fund, the EPF. That's more than double the funding provided in 2010. Much of this increase will support traditional EPF programs such as municipal recycling, parks, oceans and Great Lakes, invasive species, and land acquisition. But we're also proposing two new commitments. The first is the Climate Change Mitigation and Adaptation Account. This $32.5 million account will provide funding to communities for planning and capital investments to adapt and mitigate to the effects of climate change and reduce non-energy sector emissions and assess the vulnerabilities of our state operations. The governor is also proposing the largest investment of direct environmental justice funding ever made in New York, $7 million. This funding will continue to provide community impact grants for underserved and overburdened communities. But now it will also increase funding for air quality monitoring in urban areas, education and outreach efforts, and provide access to our wonderful state lands. Environmental justice will be one of my top priorities at DEC as the governor launches a statewide environmental justice agenda. Second, the governor has made it clear we must address the state's water infrastructure. Our communities need it, our economy needs it, and so does our environment. Last year, working with you, we enacted a $200 million Water Infrastructure Improvement Act. This first year's funding was coupled with federal grant funding and Environmental Facilities Corporation financing, turning what was $75 million in grants into over $440 million of projects. This year, we propose to add another $100 million in funding. Combined with the original investment, these funds will result over 3 years in more than $1 billion in projects, creating jobs, providing clean drinking water, and healthier waterways. Third, the governor continues to improve the state's visible infrastructure through New York Works. Since its inception in 2012, New York Works has provided more than $220 million in funding to DEC for environmental capital projects, such as repairing and improving recreational facilities, hardening dams and flood control structures, upgrading fish hatcheries, plugging abandoned oil and gas wells, and implementing our e-business strategy. This year, the governor proposes another $40 million for New York Works. Lastly, DEC's budget for the coming year recommends state operations appropriations of $462.5 million and a capital budget totaling $858.6 million. This includes the EPF investment, water infrastructure funding, New York Works, State Superfund, to continue these critical capital projects. And the budget maintains DEC's budgeted fill level of 2,946 employees. One of the best things about coming to DEC is the chance to work with such talented and dedicated staff. From monitoring air quality to issuing permits, from managing our state lands to rescuing stranded hikers, DEC's employees are there to protect and improve our environment and ensure New York is open for business. And I want to especially recognize our forest rangers and environmental conservation officers for their work responding to last weekend's storm. I had the honor of working with them as they helped dig Long Island out from near record levels of snow. And we're always proud of their work and are looking forward to replenishing their ranks with a new class this year. I'm confident that the executive budget will enable DEC to continue to fulfill its mission to protect public health and the environment. I appreciate the opportunity to testify, and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Acting Commissioner. I know that my colleague, Senator Tom O'Mara, who is the chair of the Environmental Conservation Committee, has some questions.
Thank you, Chairwoman and Commissioner. Thank you for being here this morning. Thank you for keeping your comments brief so we can get through this long agenda that we have before us today and get started out on the right foot here this morning. Last year we were very successful in retooling the brownfield cleanup program in the state. I haven't noticed, were there any changes proposed in the budget this year to the brownfield program?
We have no changes proposed in the budget this year.
All right, I didn't think so. Thank you. With regard to a couple of the items that you mentioned in your testimony, on the resiliency planning I think you said $32.5 billion for adaptation and mitigation to climate change. Can you provide a little detail on how those dollars will be awarded, what criteria there are, and who's eligible to receive those monies?
On the resiliency planning
Yes.
line? So that's a $2 million line. It's grants that go out to, actually a DOS program, grants that go out to communities to update and modernize their local waterfront revitalization plans, which is a critical tool to help communities adapt to a changing climate. Also will help them comply with anything that comes out of the Community Risk and Resiliency Act, which the legislature passed a couple of years ago.
So that is specifically to waterfront revitalization.
Yes.
Are there any limitations on what communities are eligible for it or not eligible for it?
On that line, I could confer with my colleagues at DOH. The limitations would be focused on waterfront and the extent to which any climate change work is done from the waterfront outwards into the communities and the watersheds that are impacted.
All right, but there's no demographic criteria
No.
for communities that need to be met?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. With regard to the water infrastructure projects, and that was changes we did last year in the EFC, providing grants in addition to the lower no-interest loans that the EFC has traditionally provided.
Right.
We're doing an extra $100 million this year as your proposal in the budget.
Yes, sir.
I think that has been an extremely successful program so far in what we did last year, and it's helping our governments stay within their tax caps and get some of these projects started with that extra grant money in addition to the low and no interest loans that were available there. Are there any limitations on what types of communities can receive those grants at this point?
No, all municipalities are eligible to receive those grants. There's a scoring process through the application process at EFC. Certain credit is given to hardship communities, communities that have CSO discharge problems. But this is a grant program available to all municipalities that have needs with wastewater they have to demonstrate.
In addition to the added $100 million this year, is there any change in the criteria for awarding those?
We don't expect any changes to the criteria. It worked very well this first year.
How much of the $200 million from last year has been spent, and how much remains to be awarded, or was that all awarded last year?
We actually, in year one, we only made $50 million out of that pot available for communities. We added to that an additional $25 million that came to us from the federal government. So it was actually a $75 million pot in year one, and all of that was spent and awarded.
Okay. So then, is it accurate to say then that 150 of that initial 200 is going to be reappropriated this year?
That's correct.
Plus another 100 million?
Plus another 100.
And that will also be eligible for some type of federal match to amplify that amount?
We are still looking into whether or not we can add federal dollars to that. That appeared to be a one-time shot.
Okay. With regards to seeker, there's been a great deal of discussion surrounding seeker, and I know that myself and you have spoken about this with seemingly endless processes that continue on certain projects without meeting a resolution. I know that the department has been discussing considering some changes to help streamline those efforts and provide some definity on how long, some definitions as to how long the processes may take, and some more certainty for individuals, industry, companies, whatever, that are seeking to get a project approved. And is there anything in the budget at this point with regards to any proposed changes to seeker?
There's nothing in the budget, sir. No.
When do you anticipate that you may be coming out with some seeker recommendations?
Senator, Seeker is obviously an important law that's helped to protect New York's environment. We recognize that there are aspects of the law that can be streamlined, and we heard from stakeholders from the environmental community all the way through to the regulated community about with their certain ideas. We have a package of regulations, draft regulations that we're working on right now. We expect to release those for public comment shortly.
The budget, as proposed by the executive with regard to DEC, is it calling for any increasing staff levels this year?
No, Senator, it's flat.
Okay. Now, with the delay in a lot of the decision-making, from my perspective, on significant projects, the delay is bad for industry and business and how long these things get dragged out. It's bad for the communities that may support or oppose a project. And, you know, we have one significant project in my district with surrounding the underground storage of LPG, which we're now up to somewhere around 500 arrests of people protesting this facility that is dragged on for 6 or 7 years now. And I every year I'm a little dumbfounded as to why the department isn't asking for more resources to provide staff to be able to more expediently handle these types of major issues. Now, another one that's pending now is the Constitution Pipeline, which has received all the federal approvals and is now just hung up with DEC. And without the request or what I see as a need for further staffing at DEC, these decisions just seem to drag out longer and longer and longer, and I don't think it's appropriate or fair to either side, whether you support or oppose a project in this. And more timely decision making would be more warranted. Can you address those concerns?
Well, on the LPG project, that matter right now, as you know, is with our administrative law judge in a formal proceeding. I expect to have a decision from the judge within the next few months. And as I'm the ultimate decider on that project, I can't weigh in on its merits. I will say, though, that the submissions were extensive and timely, and I know that's why it's taken quite a bit of time to walk through the process. On Constitution Pipeline, it is a large proposed project, 124-mile pipeline, 99 miles of which is in New York, many, many stream crossings and wetland crossings. Our department has been working very hard to understand the full impacts of the Constitution Pipeline. It is taking time, but I'm not going to pressure my department to move more quickly than they believe is warranted to complete their required hard look of the project.
Last question, I think, for now, unless I think it's something for another round. But you mentioned the environmental justice grants that are out there. I think you said $7 million. And you mentioned air quality monitoring, which was an issue that was raised recently with seemingly lack of monitoring stations in the southern tier. And the monitoring station that I believe is in the Binghamton area really is nothing further east than that along the southern tier for that. Can you explain, first of all, how the environmental justice grants are going to be awarded, what criteria there is for those, and what your thoughts are on air quality monitoring in the southern tier?
Of course. On the EJ grants, this is a project we launched last year with the legislature's help. It was $1 million line last year, so this year the total line is $7 million. We expect that we're going to be doubling the grant program within that. It will go to the same types of grants that we awarded last year, $50,000 maximum on each grant, and that was very popular last year. The balance of the EJ line will go to fund projects like air monitoring in urban areas, and we're going to work with the regulated community, the environmental justice community, to make sure that those grants are channeled to local air monitoring projects that have been requested. As to air monitoring statewide, we actually have 57 stations statewide, which is more than double what the EPA has asked of us. It's a strong program. We have a talented and dedicated staff that manage it. In the southern tier, there is one run by the state, and I know that there are also two that are not run by the state that we either are or will be drawing information from. I don't have the exact locations for you, but it's southern tier area. So it's painting a good picture of air quality in New York State. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the state's vital signs on air are trending in the right direction. We are seeing significant improvements since 2005 in all of the air pollutants that are of concern to us. And we'll continue to look at that hard, and we'll continue to look at how we space our air monitors across the state.
Now, finally, on the environmental justice grants, just to wrap up, are there any specific community demographic requirements or limitations for a community being eligible for such a grant?
I believe that environmental justice communities are defined in the law, and we would continue whatever definition we used last year, which was proven to be very effective.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. Next speaker will be Senator Brad Hoylman, ranking member. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, is the Assembly here today? Oh, I guess you are. You're down there. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Assemblyman.
Thank you very much. We've been joined by Assemblyman Felix Ortiz and Assemblywoman Barrett, and first to speak is Assemblyman Engelbright, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning, Assemblyman.
Just before I begin, I just want to first offer congratulations over this past year. The governor has really started to take a national leadership role on the question of climate change. We see that reflected in this budget with a major point of contention last year being the raid on Reggie. That's not in here this year. The governor has responded affirmatively on this, on the Ambrose Channel gasification project, where he very emphatically rejected that project, and of course at that remarkable event at Columbia University that we were both at. I think that was your first day as commissioner.
Great day.
But it was a great day. I'm a graduate of the University of Tennessee, and of course Al Gore Sr. was my senator when I was an undergraduate, and his son is the gold standard for climate change. It was a privilege to see our governor up on the stage with him, and it was a privilege to be there with you on your first day as commissioner.
Thank you.
All that being said, I still have some hard questions for you. So,
please, I would expect nothing less.
Under the Environmental Protection Fund, under the invasive species issue, EPF contains $10 million for invasive species, a $4.1 million increase over last year. And when asked what funding would be used for, the department indicated that specific details were not yet available, with the exception of $1 million for Adirondack invasive initiatives such as boat washing stations and boat stewards, and $500,000 to combat hydrilla in the Croton River reservoir. In the past, invasive species funds have been used for preventive activities such as statewide education and outreach, and the online invasive species clearinghouse. Only funds identified as eradication grants this year in the sum of $2 million are used for invasive removal. The DEC indicates that this year the entire $2 million will be used only for aquatic invasives. So here's some questions on this topic. New York has become home to hundreds of invasive species. That should be the first thing anyone who is a climate change denier ought to think about. The entire state has been invaded by hundreds of species that previously were limited by climate to the south. These include terrestrial and aquatic species that not only pose the potential to outcompete native species, but also bring an unwelcome financial burden. Areas across the state are struggling to combat the impacts from lakeside communities, such as those that the gentleman to my left, Assemblymember Steck, was very kind to invite me to the Adirondacks this past summer. It was eye-opening, and the communities there, as well as other parts of the state, are struggling to clear fast-spreading water plants that threaten recreational boating. We also have a southern pine beetle infestation on Long Island. Would you please identify the funding in the budget that will help with eradication efforts?
Well, Assemblyman, we have put a priority on invasive species, at least statewide. We've understood that it's a significant impact, not only to the environment, but also to local economies. So the boost of the EPF line reflects we're going to put our money where our mouth is on this. And we're going to work with the legislature, work with our experts to determine how the grants, how the monies are going to be made available. I mean, the front line, the first action has to be on education and prevention. We want to educate the community to ensure that they can do, that they know what they can do to prevent the spread of various invasives around the state. You're right, we have an enormous amount of work going on at the department level, not funded by the EPF, to remove southern pine beetle, for example, in Long Island and elsewhere. We're happy to discuss the ways in which these additional monies can be spent, and look forward to working with you on that.
I think we should take you up on your offer, and I thank you for indicating an openness and a willingness, because this is a evolving program need that we're still discovering the depth of, and we will cooperate as we did with the invitation, and we will be back to you on that. Appreciate it. We're pleased, as I mentioned, to see the EPF not working against the environment, so to speak, by pulling money, as it did last year, out of RGGI. And instead, the EPF is proposed at $300 million. This is also welcome, and we're grateful to see the governor's leadership and your leadership, because this is really critically important. This increase is based on $120 million in settlement monies, right, and an additional $3 million from the general fund. Is this something that we can identify funds for future years? We're delighted with this year and this very bold re-equilibrium, if you will. This is what we should have been doing all along. Agreed. We are nevertheless grateful that we've taken this step forward to equalize the funding with the need. So what are we looking at for future years? Where are you going to get the money next year? Is this a one-shot?
Assemblyman, this is certainly not one shot. $300 million EPF is now contemplated in the financial plan. We expect to draw upon our capital authority to meet a $300 million EPF in future years.
So you will, in future years, maintain this level. That's a commitment we will look forward to seeing being kept in future years. But will the debt service come out of the EPF? Where, if we borrow in the future, where will the debt service for the borrowing come from?
Well, all I can say, Assemblyman, is that the Department of Division of Budget has looked at this, and this is achievable within our capacity, our debt capacity.
I'm not sure that was the answer to the question, but we're concerned that the debt service not come out of EPF if borrowing is used in the future. Just so you understand where we're coming from.
Understood.
Thank you. Shifts to the EPF of projects typically found elsewhere in the budget include items such as river basin commissions this year. the Pro-Dairy Integrated Pest Management, Brownfield Opportunity Area Program, and certain local landfill agreements. Why are these shifts in the budget this year?
These shifts were on aid to localities, and we moved them into the EPF. The EPF was designed to, in part, fund such things as the Pine Barrens Commission and others. Many of the commissions that you just mentioned have similar missions, similar authorities, and it's a natural place for them to be funded through the EPF.
It is good to see new money coming into the EPF. It's not good to see an offloading of other expenses at the same time. So while we like to cheer that the whole number is bigger, in fact, it could be even bigger had these parts of the new responsibility of EPF been kept funded in the way that they had previously been funded.
Understood.
These tend to subtract from the enthusiasm that we just expressed to you.
Understood.
One of the things that will be done is, with the new funding, is land acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
What, if any, steps are being taken to ensure that the state's land acquisitions are distributed equitably or more equitably than in prior years? As you and I have discussed, the Long Island, coastal New York region, and certain of our communities in New York City have historically been dramatically underfunded.
Assemblyman, our approach to land acquisition is guided by the state's open space plan, as you know, which is a statewide view of available land. Our acquisitions over the last year and last few years, frankly, have been fairly well balanced. Last year, we spent, I believe, $3 million on acquisitions in the downstate area, regions 1, 2, and 3, which is more than is even contemplated by the line that's specifically in the EPF on downstate. So we see a number of key parcels downstate that would be helpful for the environment. You and I have talked about certainly one of them, which is at the top of our list. In addition to parkland, there's also acquisitions of wetlands and tidal areas that are important for habitat and for community. So we certainly see downstate resiliency as a very important objective of the EPF to prevent the effects of climate change. And we've talked, quite a bit and experienced these storms over the last few years where, open space is important downstate.